What kind of son gets a late-night call saying his mother is stranded in the cold 200 miles away? Why did my own brother leave her at a gas station and drive off with his wife like she was a burden? This is how I learned the truth, and how I made sure they faced the consequences. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Daniel Rowan, and the night everything changed started with a phone call that didn't sound like my mother at all. It was 11:43 p.m. I remember that detail because I just turned off the kitchen light and was heading toward my bedroom when the phone buzzed on the counter. Mom never called that late. She was the kind of person who apologized for ringing after 7 p.m., even if it was important. So when I saw her name on the screen, I answered before the first ring even finished. Her voice was thin, not shaky, not crying, just small, like she was trying to hide inside it. "Danny, I didn't wake you, did I?" Her breath sounded uneven, like she was outside. I could hear wind pushing against the phone microphone, making that soft, cold whistle. "No, Mom. What's going on?" There was a pause, a long one. Then, "I'm at a gas station on Route 6. It's the one near the old truck stop. I didn't want to bother you." My heart started knocking hard in my chest. She lived 200 miles away with my brother Mark and his wife Kelsey. There was no reason she should be at a gas station at midnight, especially in the middle of a storm. I walked to the window and pulled the blinds back. Rain was coming down sideways, drumming against the glass like gravel. "Why are you there?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "Mark and Kelsey were having a rough evening. I think it's best if I give them some space." I pressed my hand flat on the counter, steadying myself. "They dropped you off?" I asked. No, don't be upset," she said quickly, the way she always did when she thought conflict was coming. "Mark said he needed to cool down. He'll come back for me once he settles. I didn't want you to worry, but my phone battery is low, and I didn't want it to die without telling someone where I was." I felt something tighten inside my chest. Not panic exactly, something heavier. "Stay right there," I told her. "I'm coming." "Oh, Danny, no, the weather is awful. It's too far, and you have work early." "I'm coming," I said again, calm, slow, final. She let out a soft sound, like she was trying not to cry, but failing a little. "Okay, sweetheart." I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and a flashlight. I didn't know why I took the flashlight, but it felt necessary, like some part of my brain was preparing for something the rest of me hadn't accepted yet. The roads were almost empty. Streetlights blurred through sheets of rain. My wipers were going full speed, but they still couldn't clear the windshield fast enough. After the first hour, my shoulders started aching from how tightly I was gripping the steering wheel. Every few minutes, my mind replayed what Mom said. "He'll come back for me once he settles." Mark had always been like that. Impulsive, dramatic, quick to anger, quick to cool off. But this was different. Mom wasn't the type to exaggerate. If she sounded scared, she was scared. I tried calling her again halfway through the drive, but it went straight to voicemail. Her phone must have died. The thought made my stomach twist. And by the time I reached Route 6, the storm had gotten worse. Wind pushed against my car hard enough that I had to adjust my steering grip. Headlights hit the reflective sign for the truck stop, and I finally saw the gas station through the rain. A small, old place with 2 pumps and a flickering overhead light. I pulled in slowly, scanning the area. There she was, sitting on a metal bench outside the gas station wall, her thin jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, 2 plastic grocery bags at her feet. Rain had soaked her hair. She was shivering, even though she was trying to hide it. For a second, something hot rose up in me, the kind of heat that comes from seeing something wrong and knowing someone you trusted caused it. I pushed it down. Calm. Clarity. I parked and ran to her. My shoes splashed through puddles, rain hitting my face like needles. "Mom," I said, crouching in front of her, "why didn't you go inside? It's freezing." She forced a small smile. "They were closing. The young man said I could sit here until Mark returned. I didn't want to bother anyone." She said it so simply, so quietly, like she wasn't sitting out in a storm at midnight with nowhere to go. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She tried to protest, but I shook my head. "Let's get in the car," I said softly. I picked up her bags, lighter than they should have been, and helped her into the passenger seat. Her hands were ice cold. Inside the car, I turned the heat up and handed her a spare blanket I kept in the trunk for emergencies. She wrapped herself in it without a word. The gas station attendant stepped out briefly, holding the door open with his shoulder. "You her son?" he called. "Yes," he nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She's been out here a few hours. Tried to offer her a coffee on the house, but she said she didn't want to be a bother." I closed my eyes for a second. Thank you for looking out for her. He nodded again, but his eyes said everything he didn't. That he couldn't understand why she'd been left there. That he felt bad watching her sit alone in the cold. That he knew something wasn't right. When we pulled out of the station, Mom finally spoke. Mark and Kelsey had a small disagreement, she said. I shouldn't have involved myself. Her voice was soft but cracked in places. She stared out the window, watching rain trail down the glass. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. She didn't reply. She only kept her eyes on the storm outside, as if something in it was easier to face than the truth. I drove us to the nearest motel, a small one-story building with a buzzing neon sign. The clerk barely looked up when I asked for a room, but his eyes widened a little when he saw Mom trembling behind me. Once we got inside, I helped her sit on the bed and removed her wet shoes. She kept trying to tell me she was fine, but she couldn't hide how chilled she was. I gave her dry socks from my bag and turned the heater up. After a few minutes, she sighed and sank back against the pillows. I didn't mean to make this your problem, she whispered. It's not a problem, I said. It's you. Her eyes filled with something tired, a kind of exhaustion I hadn't seen on her before. Danny, they've been under a lot of stress. The house is busy, and I think I've been getting in the way. That doesn't explain tonight, I said. She looked down at her hands. They said I was making things harder, that I forget things, that I slow things down, and I didn't want to add to their frustration. Her voice trembled at the edge of each sentence, but she kept talking anyway. That was my mother, honest even when it hurt. They needed space, she said, so I thought it was best. They left you at a gas station, I said, still calm, still slow, even though something inside me was tightening more and more. Her lips pressed together. She didn't deny it. She didn't defend it. She just looked ashamed. I sat beside her and rested my hand gently on her shoulder. You're staying with me tonight, I said. We'll figure things out tomorrow. She nodded weakly, still avoiding my eyes. After she fell asleep, I sat in the motel chair and stared at the rain beating against the window. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Mark. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't bring her back until she calms down. My jaw tightened. That was the moment. Quiet, sharp, clean, when something inside me shifted. Not anger. Clarity. A deep understanding that whatever had been happening in that house was far worse than Mom had admitted. And tomorrow I would find out exactly how far it went. I woke up before the alarm the next morning, the thin motel curtains letting in a dull gray light. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then I saw my mother sleeping on the other bed, still wrapped in the blanket, her shoes placed neatly beside the mattress like she was afraid of making a mess in a room we had paid for. Her face looked older in that light, not because of lines or wrinkles, but because of the way her mouth was set, a little too tight, even in sleep. I checked my phone. No missed calls from Mark. No text asking if she was okay. Just the message from the night before, still on the screen like a stain. We had the free motel breakfast. Mom insisted she was fine, that she had just been cold, that a hot coffee made everything better. She tried to act like it was a little adventure, like we had decided to take a trip on a whim, but every time the door opened and wind blew in, she flinched. I told her we needed to pass by Mark's house. I said we should all sit down and talk. She nodded, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. On the drive, the rain had calmed to a steady drizzle. The sky was heavy and low, the kind of gray that makes everything feel slower. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind went backward. Growing up, Mark had always been the loud one. He was the kid who climbed trees he was told not to climb, who talked back to teachers, who charmed his way out of trouble with a grin. I was the quiet one, the one who did his homework on time, who stayed late to stack chairs after events, who helped Mom carry groceries without being asked. People used to say we balanced each other. What they really meant was that I cleaned up after him. Our father left when I was 12 and Mark was 8. One day there was a man in the house. The next day there wasn't. I remember Mom standing in the kitchen, holding a mug with both hands, staring at nothing. That was the year I learned what steady meant. Steady was working part-time after school. Steady was walking Mark to soccer practice. Steady was listening to Mom say she was fine when she clearly wasn't. Mark reacted to that empty space in his own way. He got louder. He tested lines. He learned that if he pushed hard enough, someone would move the line for him. Usually Mom, sometimes me. As adults, the pattern didn't change much. I went into IT, found a job where consistency and planning were valued. Mark bounced around. Sales, a car lot, a gym, a home improvement store. He liked jobs where he could talk a lot and be the center of attention. He said I was lucky I liked boring work because someone had to be normal in the family. When Mom's health started to dip a bit a couple of years ago, everyone agreed she shouldn't live completely alone. She was still sharp, but stairs were harder, and she got tired more quickly. I had offered to have her stay with me. My apartment was smaller, but it was close to her doctor and the bus stop. I told her I would adjust anything I needed to adjust. She said no. She said she didn't want to disturb my quiet life. Mark and Kelsey had a bigger house, a spare bedroom, a yard. Kelsey had said it would be good for the whole family to have Mom there. Mark joked that he would finally get some of Mom's cooking. Everyone laughed. I didn't push it. That had been my choice, my mistake. As we turned into Mark's neighborhood, Mom straightened her back. She smoothed her hair like she was about to go into an interview. I noticed her hands trembled a little when she adjusted her glasses. Their house looked like a magazine photo. Fresh paint, trimmed bushes, a decorative wreath on the door that changed with the seasons. Today it was a metal circle with fake green leaves and a wooden sign that said, "Blessed." I parked at the curb. Mom hesitated before unbuckling her seatbelt. I really think last night just got out of hand, she said softly. They were upset, and I didn't help. You were left at a gas station in a storm, I replied. There's no version of that where you did something wrong. She swallowed and looked down at her hands. She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. That told me enough. We walked up the driveway together. Mark opened the door before I could knock, like he had been watching for us. He gave me a tight smile that never reached his eyes. He said something about me making a grand entrance, like the hero in a movie. Then he looked past me at Mom and said she had calmed down a bit, like she was a child who had thrown a tantrum. Kelsey appeared behind him, arms folded. She was still in her pajamas, but her makeup was perfect. She was the kind of person who treated every room like a stage. Her eyes swept over Mom, then landed on me. She said it had been a difficult night, that Mom had gotten emotional over something small, that she had refused to stop arguing, that the car ride had become unsafe because Mom was too upset. According to Kelsey, dropping her at the gas station was a temporary measure to diffuse the situation. She used those words. Temporary, diffuse, measure. Like she was describing a business decision and not a human being sitting on a cold metal bench. I listened. I didn't raise my voice. I asked what exactly Mom had done to deserve being left there. They gave me vague answers. She had been dramatic. She had not respected boundaries. She had refused to follow the new house rules. Mom stood slightly behind me, her head lowered. When I looked at her, she tried to smile and said it had probably just been a misunderstanding, that she had spoken out of turn. She said we didn't need to make a scene. A neighbor across the street was getting into his car and watched us. A delivery driver walked up to the next house, glancing over. Mark saw them and lifted his voice, making sure they heard his version of events. He said I always rushed in, that I didn't understand what it took to care for an elderly parent full-time, that it was easy for me to play the hero when I only visited sometimes. That part stung, not because it was true, but because it was close enough to something he had said before. Over the past year, he had made little comments. He said that some of us only showed up for holidays and special occasions, while others did the real work. It didn't matter that I called Mom 3 times a week, that I handled her online medical files, that I had taken time off to drive her to appointments when Mark had a big meeting. In that driveway, with the neighbor watching and Kelsey's arms folded and Mark talking louder and louder, the roles were clear. Mark framed me as the distant brother who wanted to sweep in and judge. He painted himself as the exhausted caregiver. Mom tried to apologize to them. That hurt worst of all. She said she hadn't meant to cause trouble, that she should have kept her thoughts to herself, that she was grateful for everything they had done. She sounded rehearsed, like she had said those phrases many times. I realized we weren't going to get the truth here. Not with an audience, not with Mark worried about his image and Kelsey controlling the story. So I took a different approach. I said I understood that everyone had reached their limit last night. I said I was glad Mom was safe now. I suggested, in a neutral tone, that maybe it would help if Mom stayed with me for a while so things could cool down. I said it would give them a break. Kelsey's reaction was fast. She said that if Mom wanted to try that, it was probably for the best. She said their home was very busy right now, and not ideal for someone who needs a quieter environment. Mark hesitated, but only for a second. Then he said that if Mom wanted to go stay with her favorite son for a bit, it was fine by him. He said he had done more than his share. There was no question of whether this would hurt him. No real concern about how Mom would feel leaving, no attempt to ask what she wanted. Just relief. They made it sound like they were doing me a favor. Mom looked up at me with wet eyes and said she didn't want to inconvenience me. I told her she never had, not once, in my entire life. She tried to argue, but her voice broke in the middle of the sentence. We collected her things from the house. There were not many, some clothes, a few books, her knitting bag. I noticed things missing. The old music box my grandmother had given her was not there. The framed wedding photo of her and my father was not there. When I asked about the music box, Kelsey said she thought Mom had sold it for extra cash, then shrugged like it wasn't important. I made a note of that and did not comment. On the drive back to my apartment, Mom cried quietly, wiping her eyes with a tissue she tried to keep hidden. She said she had failed them. She said she should have tried harder to fit in. I told her she had done nothing wrong. I repeated it more than once, not because I thought she hadn't heard me, but because I knew she didn't believe it yet. My apartment is smaller, older, and far from perfect, but it is mine. When we walked in, I saw the way Mom's shoulders dropped. Just a little, like the air around her had gotten lighter. I put her bags in the spare room and made tea while she sat at the kitchen table. She kept saying she didn't want to be a burden. I kept telling her she wasn't. Eventually, she believed me enough to drink the tea and lie down. When she was settled, I went into my home office. It's a small room with a desk, a second-hand chair, and a bookcase full of manuals and old photo albums. On the top shelf, there is a gray binder with a label I printed years ago, Family Documents. I pulled it down and set it on the desk. I didn't open it yet. My hand rested on the cover. Inside were things I hadn't thought about in a while. The paperwork where Mom named me as her medical decision-maker. Some financial documents I'd helped her fill out. Forms, terms, fine print. For a long moment, I just sat there with my hand on that binder, listening to the quiet of the apartment. No raised voices, no footsteps rushing up and down stairs, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the faint noise of traffic outside. When I finally opened my laptop, I saw a new email in my inbox. The sender was a name I knew well, Mrs. Emery, Mom's old next-door neighbor. The subject line was simple. "We need to talk about Ellen. It's important." I stared at it, that single sentence making the room feel colder, even with the heater running. Whatever I thought I knew about what had been happening at Mark's house, it was clear there was more. A lot more. The email from Mrs. Emery sat in my inbox for a few minutes before I opened it. I just stared at the subject line and the sender's name, remembering the little white house next to Mom's old place, the flower beds, the plastic lawn chairs on the front porch. When I finally clicked it, the message was short. She wrote that she was worried about Ellen. She said things had not seemed right for a while before Mom moved in with Mark and Kelsey. She asked if I could come by because some things were easier to explain in person. I glanced at the clock. It was late morning. Mom was lying down in the spare room, pretending to rest and actually staring at the ceiling. I knew that pattern from years of watching her deal with stress. Resting for her usually meant thinking quietly and trying not to bother anyone. I stepped into the doorway and told her I was going to run an errand near her old neighborhood. I said I would not be long. She asked if everything was okay. I told her that I just wanted to check on a few things. She nodded and said she would be fine, that I should not worry. Her suitcase sat half open on the chair in that room, a few folded clothes inside, one small framed photo of me and Mark as kids tucked into the corner. Not much for a life of almost 70 years. The drive to her old street felt strange. I had not been there since the moving truck pulled away from the curb a year earlier. Back then, the day had felt bittersweet, but hopeful. Everyone had said that living with Mark and Kelsey would be easier for Mom, that she would have more company and help with chores. I had believed them. Mrs. Emery was already on her porch when I parked. She stood up slowly, one hand on the railing. She had the same careful movements I remembered, the same sharp eyes behind her glasses. She didn't hug me. That was not really her style. Instead, she patted the porch chair next to her and told me to sit. Then she asked how Ellen was doing now and whether she was safe. I told her Mom was with me for the moment. Safe, yes. Calm? Not really. Mrs. Emery nodded. She said she had been afraid of that. She started talking about the last year. At first, she said, things seemed all right. Mark and Kelsey helped Mom pack. They said all the right things in the driveway about family and care and being there for her. But then the visits back to the old neighborhood stopped. Mom always said she was too tired to make the trip. Mrs. Emery had asked if she could come over instead, but there was always some reason. Mark had the car. Kelsey had planned something. The timing was bad. Then Mrs. Emery's voice lowered a little, and she said that when she did see Mom, usually for a rush tea at the kitchen table, Mom looked smaller. Not thinner, just diminished. She said Mom had been walking more slowly, apologizing more often, and touching her chest when she talked, like she was trying to hold herself together. She told me she had overheard pieces of conversations when she visited the new house once. She said she had heard Kelsey complaining that Ellen was always underfoot, that she took too long in the bathroom, that she did not understand modern schedules. She said she had heard Mark telling Mom that she owed them for taking her in, that she should be more grateful. Then she told me about the yard sale. Kelsey had organized it in front of Mom's old house before the sale went through. Many of Mom's things were laid out on tables in the front yard: dishes, books, decorations, the old music box Grandma had given her, the framed wedding photo. Mrs. Emery said Mom had stood behind the table looking lost, while Kelsey had handled the money and negotiated prices. At one point, a stranger picked up the music box and asked how much it was. Mom had said softly that it was not for sale. Kelsey had stepped in and given a price anyway, saying they needed to declutter and not hold on to old junk. When the woman walked away with the music box wrapped in newspaper, Mom had turned her head so nobody would see her wiping her eyes. As Mrs. Emery described it, I felt something cold settle deeper inside me. It was not shock. It was confirmation of something my mind had already suspected but had not fully formed, that the way Mark and Kelsey treated Mom was not a series of accidents. It was a pattern. Mrs. Emery said she had tried to talk to Mom about it once. She said Mom had smiled and insisted that Mark and Kelsey meant well, that they were under stress, that money was tight, that she did not want to be in the way. She had also said that Mark had mentioned how expensive it was to host her, how much groceries and utilities cost, and how her small pension did not stretch far. Then Mrs. Emery asked me something simple. She asked whether Ellen really wanted to move there in the first place, or whether she felt like she was doing it to help someone else. I thought about the way Mom had refused my offer to move in with me, how she had said she did not want to disturb my quiet, how Mark had talked loudly about how he would take care of things, how Kelsey had used words like modern household and efficient schedule. I realized there was a good chance Mom had chosen not to choose for herself at all. When I thanked Mrs. Emery for telling me these things, she looked tired. She said she almost called me months ago, but she did not want to cause a family fight. She said she changed her mind when she heard, from another neighbor, that Mom had been left at a gas station during an argument. That detail had spread quickly in their old circle. It bothered her enough that she sent the email. On the drive home, I replayed her words in my head. Owed them, grateful, expensive to host. I also thought about the afternoon 3 years earlier when I sat with Mom at a long table in a beige office, filling out forms with a man named Paul Ingram. He was a calm, precise attorney with silver hair and a habit of tapping his pen twice before he spoke. Back then, Mom had wanted to make things simple. She had asked me to help with her paperwork. She had said she did not want us to fight over decisions if she ever got sick. She had signed a stack of documents that day: medical directives, powers of attorney, a few financial forms I had read more carefully than she had. At the time, I saw them as distant possibilities, insurance for a future that might never happen. Now, they felt closer. When I got back to the apartment, Mom was in the kitchen washing dishes that didn't need washing. She told me she was just keeping busy. I told her I had gone to see Mrs. Emery. She went still for a moment, then forced a small smile. She asked how her old neighbor was doing. I told her the basics. I said that Mrs. Emery was worried about her. I did not tell her all the details, not yet. Instead, I asked a careful question, whether Mark and Kelsey had ever asked her for money. She hesitated, then said that of course they had never asked. They only mentioned sometimes how much everything cost. She added quickly that she had wanted to contribute anyway, that she did not want to sit there without helping. She said she had given them some money here and there, that she had helped with a couple of bigger things, and that it was no one else's concern. I asked if she still had access to her own accounts. She said yes, of course, then looked away. She said Mark just helped her log in sometimes because the online system confused her. Her answer was enough to show me she did not really know. That evening, my phone buzzed. Mark's name filled the screen. I could have ignored it. Instead, I answered and listened. He started by saying I was overreacting. He said Mom had always been sensitive, that she had blown a small argument out of proportion. He said he had done more for her in a year than I had done in 10. He said he was tired of being judged by someone who got to sleep easy while he took the hard role. He then moved to money. He said that housing an extra person was not cheap. He said that the least she could do was help more regularly with expenses. He hinted that if she did not, then he would have every right to change things around her accounts because he was the one on the ground. As he talked, I stayed quiet. I did not debate every point. I only asked small questions. What did he mean by change things? Which accounts did he think he had a right to touch? On what authority? He did not have clear answers, just more bluster and more guilt. At one point he said that if Mom stayed with me, it was only fair that I take over the bill she represented. He used that phrase exactly. The bill she represented. That was the line, not the storm, not the gas station. It was that phrase, spoken casually by my brother, like our mother was a subscription service he wanted to cancel and pass on. When the call ended, I sat at my desk for a long time. The binder was still there from the morning, the one labeled Family Documents. I opened it slowly and flipped the pages, not yet focusing on the legal language, just reminding myself it existed. I saw Mom's signature. I saw my own. I saw Paul Ingram's letterhead. I didn't need to read every clause to remember the basics. Mom had given me authority to make decisions if she was being pressured or could not protect herself. At the time, we had discussed it briefly. She had said she trusted me to use the power only if absolutely necessary. I had agreed. Now, with the binder open under my hands, I understood that absolutely necessary was no longer some far-off condition. I closed the binder gently and reached for my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Paul Ingram's number. My thumb hovered over the call button for a second. I thought about all the ways this could explode, all the accusations that would follow, all the people who would say I was tearing the family apart. Then I thought about my mother shivering on a metal bench outside a gas station, waiting for a son who never planned to come back. I pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard Paul's calm voice on the other end, asking how he could help. Paul did not rush me on the phone. He listened while I described the gas station, the storm, the yard sale, and the way Mark talked about our mother like she was a cost on a budget sheet. He asked simple questions. He reminded me that our last set of documents was still valid. Then he suggested we meet in person as soon as possible. We met 2 days later in his office downtown. The building was one of those quiet brick places with creaking stairs and the smell of paper and old coffee in the hall. His office looked the way I remembered it. Neat desk, 2 chairs facing it, a tall filing cabinet stuffed with labeled folders. He had our old file open when I walked in. He said he had reviewed the basics and that nothing had changed on his end. He asked how Mom was. I said she was staying with me, that she was tired and a little confused, but safe. He nodded and said that was the most important part. Then he asked for a clear timeline. When had she moved in with Mark? When had the yard sale happened? When did the gas station incident take place? He wrote down dates as I spoke. He did not react much, but I could tell from the way he pressed his pen into the paper when I described the gas station that he did not like what he was hearing. He reminded me again of what we had set up years ago. He told me, in calm legal language, that I had been given responsibility for making decisions if Mom's well-being was at risk or if she was being pressured. He said that I did not have to guess anymore whether something was serious enough. He said that leaving an elderly woman at a gas station during a storm spoke for itself. He did not tell me to start a war. He told me to start a file. He suggested that I gather information before taking any formal step. He mentioned bank activity, medical notes, and written statements from people who had seen how Mom was treated. He said the law moved slowly and liked paper. He added that the more prepared we were, the faster the law listened. When I left his office, I felt something new. I still had anger. I still had sadness. But under both of those, there was a quiet structure, a direction. The next week became a series of small, careful steps. First, the bank. Mom and I went together. The branch was bright and smelled like polished floors. She wore her best coat, the one she kept for appointments. She clutched her purse the whole time. A young banker led us to a small desk and asked how she could help. I let Mom speak first. She said she wanted to review her accounts. Her voice shook a little. When the banker pulled up the information on her screen, Mom looked overwhelmed by the numbers and columns. I showed the banker the document that said I was authorized to ask questions and receive information. She reviewed it, checked with someone in the back, then came back and treated me very differently. She printed some summaries for us and explained certain entries in broad terms. She pointed out regular withdrawals that did not match Mom's usual patterns from before she moved in with Mark. She hesitated when she indicated a couple of larger transfers. She did not say anything openly, but her tone changed. I did not push her in that moment. I only asked if printed records could be prepared for us over the past year. She said they could. She added that the bank kept copies of any forms that changed access or added authorized users, and that those could be pulled on request. Mom watched all this with wide eyes. She kept saying she was sure everything was fine, that she trusted Mark with the computer stuff, that she did not understand the online banking. Later, in the car, she told me softly that she had never meant to be a bother to anyone, and that if she had given money to help with the house, it was because she wanted to. I told her she was allowed to want what she wanted. I did not tell her yet what I suspected about who else had been wanting things. Next, the doctor. Her primary doctor had an office across town. The waiting room was full of soft chairs and magazines no one read. When we were called in, the doctor greeted Mom warmly and asked how she was adjusting to living with me. Mom said she was fine, that I was spoiling her, that she felt safer. The doctor glanced at me over her glasses in a way that said she believed that part. When Mom stepped out with the nurse to do some tests, the doctor asked me quietly whether there had been stress at her previous home. I told her there had. I kept it simple. Arguments, pressure, a night at a gas station. The doctor closed her eyes briefly and said that some of Mom's recent symptoms made more sense now. She told me that during the past year, Mom had lost weight, had higher blood pressure, and reported feeling like she was in the way all the time. She said she had made notes about possible stress at home, but had never been given details. I asked if those notes were part of the official record. She said yes. I asked if they could be summarized or provided if needed. She said they could, with proper authorization. One by one, small pieces began to line up. At home, I used my office like a command center. That sounds dramatic, but it was really just a small room with a desk and a second-hand lamp. On the desk, I created piles. Bank papers, printed emails, notes from conversations with Mrs. Emery and the doctor. I started a digital folder on my computer labeled simply Mom. Inside it, I made subfolders: bank, medical, messages, timeline. Every time Mark called or sent a text, I saved it. When he wrote that he had carried the full weight of Mom's care for a year, I saved that. When he wrote that she owed them for the lifestyle she enjoyed, I saved that. When he wrote that if she stayed with me, I could pay for her issues now, I saved that too. He did not know that he was helping me every time he sent a message in anger. He thought he was reminding me how much I owed him. Outside of the paperwork, life kept moving. Mark suggested we meet as a family to clear the air. He chose a casual restaurant near his house. It was one of those places with wooden tables, loud music, and families with kids coloring on paper menus. I brought Mom, even though she was nervous. She said maybe things would calm down if we all sat together. Mark was already at the table when we arrived. Kelsey sat next to him, her hand on his arm, her expression practiced and calm. They both stood up and greeted Mom like nothing bad had ever happened. The conversation started soft. They asked how she was feeling, they complimented the way she looked, then slowly the tone shifted. Mark said that he hoped my place was big enough for her, because he and Kelsey had given up a lot of space. He said their bills had gone up. He repeated that he had done his part. He mentioned that not everyone was willing to rearrange their lives for a parent. He said that some people just dropped in for holidays and pretended that was love. He did not say my name, but he did not need to. Kelsey followed with her own version. She said that living with an older parent was challenging. She said routines mattered. She said that sometimes Mom forgot things, like rules about the kitchen or how late she could stay up watching TV. She made it sound like they had created a structured environment for Mom's good, and that any problem came from Mom resisting their guidance. She said that the gas station night had been blown out of proportion. According to her, they had only needed to separate for a while because the argument had gotten heated. She said Mom could have called a cab or come back soon enough, and that they never meant for her to stay there long. Around us, people were eating burgers and laughing. A server refilled glasses. Somewhere a baby cried. But at our table, every word felt sharp. Mom tried to speak once, to say that she had been scared, that the storm had been bad. Kelsey cut her off with a gentle voice, saying maybe Mom did not remember that night clearly, that sometimes older people mixed up how things happened when emotions were high. That was the moment I saw it fully. Not just neglect, but rewriting. They weren't only treating her badly. They were rearranging the story in front of her, telling her that what she felt was wrong, that what she remembered was incorrect. They were pushing guilt onto her and washing it off themselves. People at the neighboring tables glanced over a few times. They heard enough to know that something complicated was happening. I saw a woman at the next table look at Mom with sympathy when Mark raised his voice about how much he had sacrificed. I did not argue. I did not stand up or shout back. I asked one thing, whether they were comfortable repeating what they had just said if anyone ever asked for a clear description of how Mom had been living with them. Mark frowned and asked what I meant. I said I was just making sure we all had the same understanding. He said in a steady tone that he had nothing to hide, that he had done everything for Mom, that any outsider would see that. I nodded and let the conversation drift to safer topics, how work was going, how the weather had been, how busy the town was lately. The whole time I was making mental notes, the words they used, the way they framed events, the parts they left out. When we left the restaurant, Mom clung to my arm in the parking lot. She was quiet until we got to the car. Then she said that she did not like being talked about as if she were not sitting there. I told her I understood. She said she felt like she had become a problem everyone needed to solve. I told her she had never been a problem, at least not to me. That night, in my office, I wrote everything I could remember from that lunch. Not as a speech, just as facts. Who said what? Where they said it? Who could have overheard? I saved the document in the timeline folder. The days that followed settled into a routine that looked normal from the outside. I went to work. I came home. I cooked simple meals for Mom and me. She watched old shows and knitted. We went for short walks when the weather allowed. On the surface, it was quiet. Underneath, more things were moving. Paul and I spoke again. He told me to keep documenting. He reminded me to breathe. He said the law cared about patterns, about consistency, about proof that someone's rights had been ignored. I told him there was no shortage of that. Mark seemed to relax now that Mom was out of his house. His messages shifted tone. Instead of complaining about her presence, he made comments about how much easier things were. He told me he and Kelsey could finally focus on their projects. He said maybe they would travel more now. He mentioned, in passing, that they were planning something special soon, a kind of event. One evening, while Mom was in the living room watching a show, my phone buzzed. The family group chat lit up. It was a message from Kelsey. She wrote that they were organizing a Rowan Family Appreciation Night at the community center in 2 weeks. She described it as a chance to celebrate how the family had pulled together for Mom these last years, how everyone had played their part. She said it would be good for everyone to see that there were no hard feelings. I stared at the screen. The words were polished, smooth, public, a celebration of what they had done. I read the message again, then set the phone down on my desk, next to the growing stack of papers and the gray binder with Mom's name on it. They wanted a public stage. They were about to get one. My phone was still on the desk, the glow of Kelsey's message lighting up the room in a pale blue rectangle. A Rowan Family Appreciation Night, a celebration of unity, a thank you event. I read the words again, slowly, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding. But no, she meant exactly what she wrote. A neatly packaged performance, a way to show the world what a devoted son and daughter-in-law they were, a chance to paint themselves as caretakers who had sacrificed everything for Mom. They wanted applause. They wanted credit. They wanted an audience. I exhaled through my nose, long and steady. Not anger, not even surprise anymore. Just understanding. They believed the story they'd built. They needed to believe it. And they expected me to sit quietly in the back while they took a bow. It was almost midnight. Mom was asleep down the hall. The apartment felt still, like the walls were holding their breath along with me. I looked at the piles of documents on my desk. Bank statements, notes from the doctor, screenshots of messages, the timeline I'd written. Everything was lined up now, neat and orderly. I wasn't ready to reveal anything yet. Not to them, not to Mom, not even to myself in a detailed way. But I knew the direction each piece pointed. Quietly, I reached for the old gray binder again, the one labeled Family Documents. I opened it, skimmed the familiar forms, and stopped at one page with Mom's signature. A simple line at the bottom, the same line she'd signed without hesitation years ago because she trusted me. I rested my hand on the page for a moment. Then I closed the binder and placed it carefully inside my briefcase. Not yet, I told myself. Planning wasn't the same as acting. And until I was sure what needed to be done, everything stayed inside this room. The next morning, I made eggs and toast for both of us. Mom tried to insist she didn't eat big breakfasts anymore, but she finished the plate without comment. She looked steadier than she had all week. Her hands shook less when she held her mug. Her voice was stronger. After breakfast, she asked if I could drive her to the library. She said she hadn't been back since moving in with Mark and missed the quiet there. I agreed, and we spent an hour walking through the shelves. She picked up 3 mystery novels. I noticed she lingered at the large print books, then quietly slid one into her pile without calling attention to it. Seeing her make her own choices felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. On the drive home, she asked if Mark or Kelsey had said anything recently. I told her only that they were planning some kind of family event. I said it lightly, without detail, and she didn't ask more. But I saw the way she pressed her lips together, the way her gaze shifted to the window. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. Over the next week, my routine became a quiet machine. Work during the day, check on Mom, cook, small errands, and in between, careful, invisible steps. At the bank, I met privately with the same young banker. I didn't request anything formal yet. I only asked questions. I asked whether older account holders were allowed to add or remove authorized users without being present. She said no. I asked whether digital access changes required direct confirmation. She said yes. I asked how many times the system had attempted to add anyone new to Mom's accounts in the last year. She looked at her screen for a long time before answering. I thanked her and left. At the doctor's office, I asked for a simple wellness summary for Mom. Not a complaint, not a request for investigation, just a record. The doctor gave me a printed sheet with her concerns neatly listed, dates attached, no story attached, only observations. At home, I organized all of it into folders, digital and physical. I labeled one folder, Event Prep, not because the reveal would happen there, but because that's where everything would converge. Each night, after Mom went to bed, I sat in my office with a cup of tea and read through the documents again. Not the deep legal parts, just the shape of things. How one detail led to another, how each pattern repeated itself. I didn't write speeches. I didn't plan a dramatic confrontation. I only prepared. Preparation was its own kind of calm. 3 days before the appreciation night, I received a call from Paul. He had reviewed what I'd given him, quietly, methodically. He asked if I needed anything else drafted. I told him not yet. He suggested I bring everything to the event, in case the opportunity arises. He didn't ask me to explain. He just knew. He reminded me that the point wasn't revenge. It was protection. Legal, clean, calm protection. I thanked him. After the call, I sat still for several minutes, listening to the quiet of my office. Outside the door, Mom was humming softly as she watered the plants on the windowsill. That small sound settled something in me. This wasn't about punishing Mark or Kelsey. This was about making sure Mom never again had to apologize for existing. The day before the event, I suggested we go for a walk in the park. It was sunny. One of those clear days that feels borrowed after a week of clouds. Mom wore a scarf I hadn't seen in years, a blue one with soft frayed ends. She said she found it in her suitcase and didn't remember packing it. We walked slowly on the path, passing joggers and dogs pulling their owners along. At one point, we sat on a bench. She looked at the lake, then at me. "You've been very patient with me," she said quietly. "You don't need patience, Mom. You need space." She nodded, absorbing that. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "I don't want to be a burden to you, Danny." I shook my head. "You're not. You never have been." She looked down at her hands. "I thought living with them would make things easier. For both of you, I didn't want to take your time." "That's not how family works," I said. She nodded again. Her voice dropped even lower. I don't think I understood what I was stepping into. Hearing her say that, in her own words, settled something final inside me. Not anger, not urgency, just certainty. She wasn't confused, she wasn't mistaken. She didn't need anyone to explain what had happened. She knew, and she was ready for it to end. The morning of the event, I woke early. I made coffee. I ironed a clean shirt. I polished my shoes. I packed the briefcase. Inside it, everything was arranged neatly. Documents, statements, printed messages, and the old binder. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just facts. Mom walked into the kitchen wearing a simple gray sweater and the same blue scarf. She looked calm. Not cheerful, but steady. "Do you want to go?" I asked her. She took a moment before answering. Then she said, "I think I should see it. I want to hear what they say." "Okay," I said. We ate in silence. I could tell she was nervous, but not the shaky kind. More like someone preparing for a long-delayed conversation. Before we left, she touched my arm lightly. "Thank you for standing by me," she said. "I always have," I replied. And it was true. Even when I had been quiet, even when I had tried to avoid conflict, even when I had accepted things I shouldn't have, I had been there. Just not like this. We drove to the community center. The parking lot was already half full. Families were walking in with casseroles and desserts. Kids ran ahead holding balloons. It all looked harmless on the surface, the way most dangerous events do. Mark and Kelsey liked attention. They liked crowds. They liked having an audience watch them do the right thing. The community center door was decorated with a banner, celebrating family care and support. I saw Mark inside, moving between guests, shaking hands, laughing loudly. Kelsey stood near a table, arranging gift bags as if she were hosting a charity gala. They had both dressed nicely, polished, and bright. Mom stood beside me, taking it all in. Her expression didn't change much, but her hand tightened slightly on her purse strap. I placed a hand lightly at her back and guided her inside. As soon as we stepped through the doorway, conversation shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but subtly. People looked over. Some smiled in greeting. Some didn't. Mark noticed us and lifted his chin in acknowledgement. Not warmth, not welcome, just acknowledgement. I felt the atmosphere settle around me, like the air before a storm. quiet, dense, waiting. I adjusted the briefcase in my hand. I didn't know exactly how the next hour would unfold. I didn't have a script, but I had facts. And I had the one thing Mark never expected me to have: readiness. As we walked further into the decorated hall, the hum of conversation dimmed for a moment, like someone had turned down a dial. Mark stepped up to the small stage at the front of the room and tapped the microphone. The speakers crackled. People turned. The lights dimmed just slightly as someone adjusted a switch. The room grew still. The event was beginning, and so was everything else. Mark tapped the microphone twice, each tap echoing through the community center hall like a small warning. Conversations dimmed, chairs shifted, children were guided back to their seats. The room, warm with bodies and chatter just seconds ago, became a quiet bowl of expectation. He smiled, not at me or Mom, but at the crowd, the kind of smile used by people who believe the stage belongs to them by default. "Thank you all for coming," he said, projecting his voice with practiced ease. "Tonight is about family, about honoring those who've supported Mom over the last year." A few people nodded. Someone clapped lightly. Kelsey stood near the front, hands folded, chin lifted, ready to receive admiration she thought she had earned. Mark continued, voice swelling with pride. "It hasn't been easy. Caring for a parent never is. But we stepped up, didn't we?" He glanced at Kelsey, who nodded solemnly. "We rearranged our home, our schedules, our lives." He paused, scanning the crowd for sympathy. "But that's what family does." Mom sat beside me in the third row, hands folded tightly in her lap. She stared straight ahead, her face unreadable but alert. She wasn't shrinking into herself anymore. She was listening. Mark raised his voice slightly. There were challenges, hard days, emotional moments. Then he looked directly at me. Not everyone was ready to help, but we didn't complain. We handled it. A few heads turned toward us. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I only rested my hand on the handle of my briefcase. Mark spread his arms like a preacher. "Tonight, we celebrate resilience, sacrifice, commitment, and the strength it takes to be there for a parent when they need you most." He nodded to Kelsey, who lifted a small card. "We've prepared a slideshow," she said, moments from the past year, photos of our journey with Ellen. Before she could begin, my attorney, Paul, stepped in through the side door. He wore a gray suit, simple and quiet, but his presence shifted the room's balance like a weight placed on the opposite side of a scale. Mark noticed him and frowned. Can we help you?" Paul smiled politely. "No interruption. I'm here at Daniel's request." The crowd murmured. Mark turned back to me, eyebrows raised. "Really? You needed a lawyer for a family event?" I stood. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The room pivoted toward me. "Mark," I said calmly, "before you start the slideshow, there are a few things we need to clarify." He laughed, loud and forced. "Clarify? Daniel, this is supposed to be a positive night. You always have to make things dramatic." "I don't," I replied. "But you did." A ripple moved through the audience. Kelsey stepped forward, arms crossed. "This isn't the time or place for whatever you're planning." "It's exactly the time," I said. And then I set the briefcase on the nearest table. The soft click of the latch's opening sounded louder than Mark's taps on the microphone. The first thing I took out was the gray binder, Mom's signature on top. I didn't raise it high. I didn't wave it around. I simply held it where Mark and Kelsey could see it clearly. "This," I said, "is the power of attorney Mom signed 3 years ago. It gives me full authority over her medical and financial decisions if she is put at risk. Legally, permanently." Kelsey's face drained of color. Mark stepped back from the microphone. Someone whispered in the second row. I placed the binder gently on the table and pulled out the first folder. "These," I continued, "are bank records from the last year. Withdrawals Mom didn't authorize, transfers she didn't understand, repeated attempts to change access permissions, all from your devices." I said it like I was naming items in a grocery list. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. His face reddened. "That's ridiculous," he sputtered. "Mom gave us permission." "She didn't," I said, "and the bank has logs, times, dates, IP addresses, all preserved." A hush fell. I opened the next folder. "These are statements from Mom's doctor. Notes documenting stress, weight loss, elevated blood pressure, and repeated comments about feeling like a burden." The doctor's name triggered recognition in several guests. A few leaned forward. "And," I said quietly, "a written statement from Mrs. Emery about what she witnessed, including the yard sale where Mom's belongings, family heirlooms, were sold without her consent." Kelsey made a small choking sound. I wasn't done. I took out the last set of documents. And these, I said, holding them for one sharp second, are records regarding the night you left Mom at a gas station in a storm. A police report can be filed at any time. The attendant remembers her. So does the time-stamped security footage. Gasps broke out. Even the children had gone quiet. Mark's voice cracked. Daniel, stop. You're twisting everything. You think you're some kind of hero, but you don't know what we dealt with? You're right, I said. I didn't know, but now I do. Kelsey stepped forward suddenly, pointing at me. You can't prove that we... She doesn't have to, Paul said, stepping beside me. The burden of proof is already met. Legally, Daniel can restrict your access to Ellen completely, effective immediately. Mark looked around, searching for support, but the audience had shifted away from him. People who once nodded at his speeches now avoided his eyes. I turned to Mom. Do you want to stay with me? I asked, not loudly, not privately, just clearly. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stood up. Her voice was soft but firm. Yes, I do. The room reacted like someone had broken glass. Sharp, sudden, a collective inhale. I held out my arm. She took it. Kelsey tried one last time, her voice rising with panic. You can't just walk out. After everything we did for her... Mom turned her head, just slightly, and said something I had never heard her say before. You didn't do anything for me that wasn't for yourselves. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark grabbed the microphone again, desperate now. You're tearing the family apart. No, I said. You did that when you treated Mom like an inconvenience. Then I closed the briefcase with a soft click. That sound echoed louder than any shouting could have. I walked Mom toward the exit. People moved out of the way. Some touched her shoulder gently. Some glared at Mark. Some simply watched with wide eyes, witnessing the collapse of the story he had built. Behind us, Mark kept talking into the microphone, but the speakers had been cut by someone at the sound booth. His voice turned into a muffled, powerless echo. The community center doors opened as we approached. Evening air swept in, cool and clean. We stepped outside together. In the parking lot, the sounds from inside were faint, shuffling, muttering, the unraveling of their narrative. I unlocked the car and helped Mom inside. She leaned back against the seat, closed her eyes, and let out a long breath. For the first time in a long time, her exhale didn't sound tight. I walked around to my side, opened the door, and sat down. Before starting the engine, I looked at the quiet building behind us. No dramatic music played, no applause, no epilogue. Just a simple truth laid bare in a room full of people. Actions have consequences. Mark and Kelsey finally met theirs. I turned the key, and we drove away into the calm night.